Welcome to the Listening Eyebrow with your hosts, Perry Urban and Christopher Sharon.
We should just have the recordings going all the time, just like that.
You're right.
Yeah, but feel good music. Yes, his music is definitely feel good. And I think when you're younger, you do feel you're quite entitled to feel angry about things. I think when you're younger,
yeah,
I think quite a lot of musicians start off with that edge, and that sort of, I'm going to change the fucking world with my music. And as you get older, you sort of realise it's not probably going to happen that way. So you kind of mellow into a comfort zone, and you begin to appreciate things differently than you do when you're sort of 20.
Yeah, I do know, and I feel that as I go, and I find that, and there was like the edge of that music didn't have as much of an effect on me when I was younger either. It was like I was cheering it on, whereas I get older, I find the stuff I put into me has a more drastic effect on how I experience life, and so sometimes I'd rather listen to good vibrations than Long Road No Turns, not because I like one song more than the other, but I'd rather walk around with good vibrations in my head than somebody's always got it worse over and over again.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So how do you? I mean, is this a conscious decision? I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of my own process now, but because I'm struggling, I'll just fling it back at you and say, how do you, when you find yourself listening to a piece of music and you're into it and all that, and you're listening to it, how did you get to the point where you chose that bit of music to listen to? Is there one process, a million processes, or do you not even know? Oh,
you know what? There's a lot of them going on sometimes. And sometimes there's a nostalgia I'm going after. So there's something that song, reflects in my life that I want to recapture that emotion, and that that music will bring me there. Like Frank Zappa, One Size Fits All reminds me of being a very young child, like that, especially with his close mic techniques. I feel like he's whispering into my ear as like a baby, and it's and I feel very, the world feels simple and safe when I have that feeling, and I like to go there sometimes, and so that's, but sometimes my decision is based off of, a chemical experience I had solely to do with the music itself, and it wasn't linked to nostalgia. Like I say, a song like "Blessed Relief," not to bring Zappa back into it, but "Blessed Relief" off of the Grand Wazoo. There's this like little, I don't know if it's a sequencer or just a really fast played, like mini moog or whatever it is, and it's very thin, and it's higher in the register, and it's kind of like cascades, like a waterfall. And it goes up and down, and it's very whimsical. And every time I hear it, I get this like sensation of like warm or cool water, depending on what I'm desiring, pouring down my back, and I get this, and I don't know, I've heard people describe that as like ASMR, or I forget the initials and what the order of it, but I get these different physical sensations from different moods, and sometimes I'm chasing that, so it is a conscious decision sometimes. And
so that's a slightly synesthetic experience then, isn't it? Transferring music into another feeling.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you say that, because I think I used to do that as well. I'm remembering back to Hot Rats and another album by Captain Beefheart, Clear Spot, that I used to always go back to, just for the same sorts of reasons that you're talking about. I first heard Hot Rats in about 1975, Clear Spot a few years after that, but they both take me back to that kind of time. But as I've got older, I've lost that. I don't seek that kind of, if you like, that kind of comfort or that kind of recollection. Most of my listening is done to authorize new music into my collection, but I very seldom go back into that collection and listen to old stuff. I'm looking for new stuff that I can add to what I consider to be a curated collection, not just a random collection. It's my authorized collection, if you like. So I'm looking for new music now. And it's interesting. I haven't gone back and listened to just old stuff, unless it was because there was a remaster or a remix, or because it came up in conversation or something. And I find when I go back and listen to music from 30, 40 years ago, it sounds the same, but it doesn't. Because when I listened to it back then, I maybe didn't know anything when I was listening to it. All I heard was the sounds and didn't know even what instrument was making those sounds. Whereas now, rather than having a synesthetic experience where the music is transformed into shapes or textures or whatever, now I'm imagining a room with instruments in it. So it's a kind of different experience now. That's interesting. It's interesting when you talked about that. It did take me back to, I used to do that as well. Yeah, I definitely remember that. And especially when would get stoned or I would get high on mushrooms, Hot Rats was the one I would put on.
That's a
Hot
great one.
Rats on mushrooms is just absolutely insane. It really is.
It is. If I was going to give a one album, like if you're going to do one album at a mushroom peak and only ever do one album, it would be Animals by Pink Floyd for me. And,
all right.
And I don't know why, other than the fact that it might be because I'm echoing a bit, because I know a couple other people that feel the same way about that album. And I know people personally and people that I don't know personally. I've heard, like a comedian I've heard say, if you want to change yourself, you want to fix yourself, 5 grams of mushrooms, lights off, Pink Floyd Animals, done.
Well, the remix was very good, I have to say. I didn't like the original album very much. I'd listened to it. I stopped enjoying Pink Floyd around the time of Wish You Were Here, and I must have moved on to Zappa and Krautrock and stuff like that, and I lost touch with them, and I came back to them 10 years later, and Animals was one of the ones I listened to, and I went, what on earth is this? That the first track, the first and last track is Roger Waters playing the guitar badly, according to my lights.
Yeah, I hear that.
When you've got Dave Gilmour there, why would you insist on playing the guitar? But those are very short tracks, I know, and the rest of it on the remix, I think is wonderful, and it's like a new Pink Floyd album for me. So yeah, I probably would sign up for that mushroom experience if that was the album that we were choosing. I would just have to not obsess too much about the first and last track.
Yeah, well, and that's the way I see that, is like the first track is when I'm sitting down, I'm making sure I got a nice cold drink within reach, and I got nice, there's cushions and comfiness around me. I got a loose shirt. I put my feet up, making sure the volume's adjusted, make sure there's as little light on as possible. Maybe make sure my cat's there if I want to pet my cat. and then by the time I'm settled in, dog starts, and then you're in for a journey.
Yeah. Oh, good stuff.
It is. But yeah, I love listening. I know you do too, and I hope everybody else does as well.
Exactly, yes. If you're not here to listen, then why are you here? There's no other reason to be here. So I think we're going to go with. Well, you do this one. If Morning Comes by Alan Johannes.
Yeah, if morning comes, and I don't know if it's Alan Johannes or Alain Johannes. I think it's something like that, but I really don't know. I should ask him. But I came to know Alain as he was an auxiliary musician for a few Queens of the Stone Age records. He was on, I think he played on Songs for the Deaf, maybe even Rated R too. And I think he was there for Lullabies to Paralyze. And his wife and partner, what's her name? Natasha Schneider. She was also playing keyboards with Queens of Stone Age at the time. And they had their own band, I think, called 11. And she passed away. She got cancer and died really suddenly. It was like she just didn't feel well one day, and she was gone within a couple weeks. And
jeez.
And I've just noticed that ever since then, everything he does has this dark shade to it. And it's and I don't know. I've never heard him talk about Natasha Schneider at all. I've never heard him talk about it in an interview. He's not very famous. So you don't see a lot of people interacting with him, but he interacts with lots of famous musicians because he's a master at what he does. He's worked with, like I said, Josh Homme and Queens of the Stone Age, and he's worked with he's in the Crooked Vultures with Josh Homme again, and Dave Grohl, and that bass player from Zeppelin, John Paul Jones, and he's a wonderful musician, and he's always the best musician on stage whenever you see him. And yeah, so I don't know, this album here was one of the first solo albums that he like managed to finish, because he's done all these little pieces of albums where he has an intention to release an album, and then a couple songs come out and the album never comes to fruition. But this one did, and immediately, like, I was just stung by it. This wasn't the first song I heard off the album, but this is the song that gets stuck in my head the most when I listen to the album. There's something magic about it, and it reminds me of really hard nights, like the worst nights you can imagine, where you're just, you're not sure if you're gonna see tomorrow. And I don't know if that's what he's hearkening to, but that's the idea. Like, if morning comes, not when. So let's go with If Morning Comes by Alain Johannes off of his album Hum.
Morning comes, I will kneel to the sun.
that is a good example of what I would call a saturated mix.
Yeah.
It's very deep, and it works wonderfully, of course. Shouldn't make the distinction between an open mix and a saturated mix. There's not one isn't better than the other. It's just what it is, and it kind of gives me goosebumps. But then there's a kind of darkness, an undertow of darkness, which comes from what I could only describe as a sort of Eastern flavour. There's a kind of almost a Sanskrit kind of undertone, sort of ancient mystery sort of going on in this harmony. And it's a tambura or a tabla or something which maintains its place throughout the whole piece, which is kind of grounding. And then when you look beyond, if you're kind of visualizing it as I was listening, you look beyond and there's just like a dense forest of instrumentation that you really can't see the end of. You know, if you're looking for the bass drum, well, it's there, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the snare. I could hear the guitars. I could hear the voices. I could hear the tabla or whatever it is. And then when the leads came in, they were cycling around in the most kind of psychedelic kind of way. One of them might have been played backwards. I don't know. Yeah, it's got a wonderful, rich kind of depth to it, which is actually quite unusual. With that combination of the weird Eastern harmonies with that kind of production I haven't really heard that before. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think we're going to go next with a track from Ambient Tear, from an album called What Do I Have to Do. I don't know much about this chap. His whole catalogue is available at a knockdown price on Bandcamp, which is how I sort of first came to him. I can't remember. I think I must have seen a YouTube video or something, and I thought that's interesting. Looked at the Bandcamp page, and he put out an appeal at one time for. He's got an appeal going on at the moment for charity. I can't remember what the charity is, but you'll find the details on his Bandcamp page on the latest thing that he's released. And he does a kind of wide variety of ambient based stuff. You'll hear that this one's a more electronic than ambient, but he's got a lot of just beautiful ambient music. Puts out a lot of stuff. I don't think he puts out albums all the time. Puts out a lot of single tracks and then compiles them into albums or makes albums every so often. But I just love it. I love the whole sort of feel of well done ambient music, because it just draws you into this space. Quite often ambient music is kind of boring, if you know what I mean. It gets kind of samey. Like a good example would be Brian Eno's Thursday Afternoon, which lasts for an hour, which when it was released was the first time anybody had ever done anything like that. And I sat and listened to it, and first of all, I don't think it's ambient music because there's too much going on. And the problem with that is if there's too much going on and the piece goes on for an hour, I find it very fatiguing. I'm looking for something new. Whereas if the track is 5 minutes long and nothing much happens, I find that more palatable, you know? If nothing's going to change, keep it short. That's my philosophy. So anyway, this is What Do I Have to Do from What Do I Have to Do by Ambient Tear.
All right. I do dig that song. I'm definitely not the kind of guy that would typically voluntarily listen to music that sounded like that.
Yeah.
But I don't mean like, because I like ambient music, but I that's, to me, that's more of like a dance song. And I know, like, it's in the description there, I think he says something like it's a song he heard in his dream, or he was at a party or something in his dream. And that's the song that was playing, or that's his interpretation of the song he remembers playing in his dream.
Oh, right.
Which I do find fascinating. I don't know how people do that. I have never been able to come out of a dream and be able to make a musical representation of something I dreamed about. Never. Even though I have songs that I claim came to me in dreams, they weren't literal, like REM dreams. They were like daydreams.
Yeah,
kind of psychedelic. Like hallucinations and behind my eyes kind of thing. But that thing there, I enjoyed it. That thing, it almost sounds like I'm being derogatory towards a song. That song, What Do I Have to Do, I think is beautiful. And I love the way he uses like the disjointed syllables from the vocal part as an instrument, like a rhythmic and melodic instrument. I love the way the bass drum, it's almost, for that type of music, it's almost laid back, which I liked about it, because a lot of modern music that fits that genre, the bass drum, it's so bumped into everything and so sidechained. It's like it's constantly pushing the music out of the way. That one gives it a bit of a bump, which satisfies those people that like that sidechain effect that has on your ears. It's almost like a massage, which I do love that sound myself. So I find he does that really well, and it's just musical enough to be not boring for a dance song, but it doesn't go too far out of the realm to distract the person that may just want to, stomp their feet to a 4/4 kind of beat,
Yeah.
I dig it. I definitely want to get this guy's discography.
Yeah, I think this is probably atypical of what he does. For the most part, his name reveals his interest, the ambienteer part of it. But I just liked this track, and I thought it would be a good contrast to the other kind of stuff that we're playing. And I think it's a very upbeat, very summery kind of colourful kind of track. His artwork for the track is pink and yellow, which is just, so in my mind that track is pink and yellow as I'm listening to it. Yeah, really good. I enjoy that. Yeah.
Yeah, the image in the track too. It's just some sort of like disembodied digital smear, which I do dig as well.
Yeah. I think up next we've got the Oxbow track, Icy White and Crystalline.
All right. Now, this song, I'm not in, like, it's a brand new song. I think it came out like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. I added it. It's the newest song we're playing. So I don't have the familiarity and the relationship to the song that I have with the other Oxbow stuff. I'm familiar with. I have an Oxbow record called the Thin Black Duke that I think was one of the best albums of the year. I think it came out the same year as that Daughters record, but it wasn't on Ipecac Records. This is the only song that Oxbow has released on Ipecac, and I'm pretty sure the album's going to follow if it hasn't already come out. But this was the first song that was released, and it checked the same boxes in my mind and sonically that I like about the previous album that wasn't on Ipecac Records. And if anybody's wondering why I'm saying this, Ipecac Records gave us permission to play any song out of their catalog without having to pay them,
yes.
And which is awesome, because Ipecac Records to me is one of the greatest record labels of modern day. It's owned and run by Mike Patton, who, for me, he's probably a musician I talk about the most outside of maybe Zappa. And these guys aren't working with Mike in this case, but I guess they went after Ipecac for a 1 record deal, and this is the album they're doing. So it's good stuff. There's something weird about the lead singer for Oxbow, and because they're not famous, you don't get the insight into this guy like you would with like Mick Jagger or something. But I'm pretty sure he's on the spectrum. I don't think this guy is a normal human being. He when you see him on stage, his interaction with the audience doesn't match the rest of the band. Like the band the band looks like a bunch of guys from California who like to play Red Hot Chili Pepper music. And the lead singer is this really sweaty black guy that wraps duct tape around his head because he doesn't like to wear earplugs. So he just, duct taped ears is his earplug. And he mumbles. Like, I can never understand anything he's really saying. And when he do get through, it sounds very visceral and disgruntled. Like, he sounds like an angry employee that hides in the corner that probably has a gun in his lunchbox. You should probably stay away from him.
He's that guy. He
seems like that guy. But and so for some reason these guys just, they gel in a certain way that I dig, and the guitar tones are always fantastic. The guitar player with the Stratocaster has just got some of the best tones I've ever heard. And just like anything else I like to listen to, it doesn't sit anywhere. It's always on its own. That seems to be if I'm going to buy an album, typically, and get into you, your music has to be you. Like, it can't be like, oh, this is me trying to sound like Meshuggah, and then I go into like a Queens of Stone Age vibe, and then I go Floydian over here. You can describe music that way, but if that's how you think when you're writing your song, I'm probably not going to like what you're doing. I want you to be like, this is what's me. I don't know what you're doing, but this is what I'm doing, and these guys do that really well, I think. So
cool.
Icy White and Crystalline off of the album of the same title. I think maybe it's a single title by the band called Oxbow.
goodness. Well, wow. I should have had my protective gear on for that. That was that was the very definition of heavy. Yes. I think, especially the vocals. You don't often hear that. The guy's got a genuinely ripped voice. You know, his voice is genuinely breaking up almost all the time, but a wonderful sort of cry at times, that kind of sound that he does, which I can't do. Very, very authentic. I mean, there's no artifice in that voice at all. That voice is just delivering everything and holding nothing back. In that kind of way, it reminded me a bit of Idols. I don't know enough about Idols to talk about them very much, but they're very much in your face, and the vocalist, you know, has the veins standing out in his neck as he's giving it everything, and this guy sounds the same. And your description of him as a character kind of fleshes out that sound that I just heard. And let's not forget about the band and the production. First class. I mean, just absolutely top notch, you know, just hard hitting, fantastic. What would you say? How would you describe that? It's not the most innovative rock music. It's definitely rock music. It's definitely that thing. It's big slabs of sound. It's a fantastic rhythm section with either one or two guitarists fitting right into the groove. I don't know whether it's been produced on Pro Tools and all aligned, and maybe they're a bit more loose live. I don't know, but certainly everything was absolutely on the money in that backing track. But of course, the thing that grabs you by the shirt collar and screams at you is that voice, and I will be definitely listening to more of that, because that's it's not very often you come across a really authentic voice, someone who really does something that you haven't really heard anywhere else. I mean, I'm saying I equate it with Idols because it's the same energy of performance, but I don't think the sound is the same, but the energy of performance reminds me of that. Reminded me a little bit of Marilyn Manson, but was probably the next step up. Manson is more sepulchral and kind of sleazy than this guy. This guy's got such energy, but the actual vocal tone reminded me a bit of Manson. Manson's got that kind of brokenness to his voice as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was really good.
Glad you dug.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know where to go after that. There are some tunes that just kind of stop you in your tracks, and you're like, okay, right, we need to move on, I suppose. The next thing we're going to play. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say that sort of effect is often what like I go for with my songs. I want someone to feel like after they're done listening to one of my songs or one of my albums, that they can't listen to music afterwards. Like nothing will. You know, they're all wore out and sore, and there's nothing that's gonna push buttons anymore. You're just like, that's it. I'm gonna go meditate or listen to Brian Eno.
Yeah, you've definitely, there's definitely moments where you do what that guy was doing.
Yeah,
I've definitely heard that in your stuff. It's definitely there. Yeah, but. Yeah, I think we're gonna move on to something else, obviously, because if we didn't, it would be a pretty rotten show.
True.
This is a guy from Mexico who goes by the name of El Universo, and I was so mad because I've ordered CDs. Ordering CDs from Mexico is a pleasure, by the way, because they're so cheap and the postage is so cheap. I want to get all my CDs from Mexico in future. But anyway, I've ordered a couple of CDs from him, and obviously his stuff's up on Bandcamp as well. I'd recommend getting hold of the CDs because I don't think they'll be around for very much longer, and they're really good. If you like krautrock, if you're into Can and Neu and Harmonia and all those kind of bands, the Schlagzeug kind of beat and all that kind of stuff, this guy from Mexico, he's called El Universo. Is really good at that kind of thing. But the reason I was mad was he just played in Scotland. Just a couple of weeks before the CD arrived, he played in Glasgow. I could have gone to see him, but I didn't know he was here. I didn't expect that somebody who was doing that kind of music in Mexico would ever make it to the UK. The UK being a politically kind of isolated place now, thanks to our exit from Europe, but we shan't go into that. But anyway, so I don't know really much about this guy. He plays live. I'd love to see one of his live shows. He employs a rhythm section when he plays live. I'm not sure what he does on the albums. Yes, I think he uses them too. But anyway, this is a track called Red Moon from El Universo by El Universo.
Right on. That's some proper desert rock to me right there. That screams real Mexico to me. Have you ever been to Mexico, Perry?
No, I've not. No, I've not been to Mexico. No.
No, I've never been to Mexico. I say because that makes me feel like the real Mexico to me. When I think of how I have experienced Mexico, it makes me feel like it. And it's
wow.
Yeah,
well, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't. I obviously don't know Mexico as a Mexican. I've never spent more than a week there at a time. And I'm not hanging out in Mexico City or anything on like Insurgentes Boulevard or anything. I'm usually down in the jungle area, the Caribbean side, where the white beaches and Mayan ruins are, But I took my wife to Mexico one time, and it was her first time going on like any real vacation, and she loves history. She's a huge history buff, and she just loves pyramids and all the ruins and everything. And so I wanted to take her to as many as I could in a week without, just spending her whole week just traveling. And I rented a car, which terrified my wife. The idea of being able to just drive around Mexico, because in Canada, the government, like I think Mexico is like on one of our highest, like don't go there countries warned by the government, like just travel advisories all the time, and all these news stories about Canadians having their heads cut off and left in dumpsters down there, And I mean, maybe it happens, but those guys are probably assholes, So.
Only assholes get their heads cut off. It's true.
Yeah, in my experience, that's typically the case. Yeah. So, so that made me think of it makes me feel like I'm driving these big, long roads, as the sun's coming up, and you're driving for hours looking for some ruin somewhere that, my wife wants to go look at and walk around and experience. And you get to see, there's dogs, these stray dogs running around all over the place, and pregnant women on scooters with 3 kids on the back of it, and there's just, there's broken down trucks everywhere, and there's no, like, everything's lawless, everything's just hanging on by a thread, and people, their clothes are ripped, and everybody's like just dirty, and they look tired and hot all the time, and that song kind of gives me that vibe, tired and hot all the time,
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I just get the krautrock vibe from it. I can hear Jackie Leib's out on the drums there, that sort of insistent motoric kind of thing. And there's when the guitar modulates to, it changes at one point, and it's just pure Michael Rother. It's that thin sustained sound that Michael Rother used to use so effectively. Did I tell you my funny story about Michael Rother?
I don't think so. Go for it.
Oh, I'll tell you it now then. It's not really about Michael Rother, but it kind of is. Went to see Michael Rother in Edinburgh. He's played there a couple of times, so we've been fortunate enough to see him in a really tiny venue. We saw him first time when he was playing with Dieter Mobius, which was amazing. And the second time we went to see him, he was playing with a full band. Oh, this is great, And he played all the old Neu classics and all the old Harmonia classics, and we were in seventh heaven. It's this is fantastic. And I said to my wife during the break in one of the songs, I said, that drummer, he sounds almost exactly like Hans Lamp. That's amazing. Hans Lamp being the drummer from Neu, the original drummer from Neu. And when he introduced the band, of course, it was Hans Lamp. I didn't even know, It's not really that funny a story, but
I like when that kind of stuff happens, though. I've had those moments where I'm like,
yeah,
oh, that sounds like so and so, and you're the only person in the room that probably knows or can do that, or it's and everybody's just like, and you impress yourself because no one else is impressed by it.
Yeah, I think I was probably, to be fair, I was probably the only one in the room that didn't know it was Hans Lamp.
Oh, okay.
It was probably in the publicity and everything, but I just didn't look at any of that, and I didn't really know who was. All I knew was it was Michael Rother. I didn't know who else was going to be in the band, so it came as a nice surprise. So I've seen one half of Cluster. I've seen all of Kraftwerk, and I've seen 2/3 of Neu, if you want to put it in those terms. And I saw Ermin Schmidt as well once, and I saw Jackie Leibsite too when he played with Bill Laswell. Yeah, so I've seen quite a lot of them in one form or another. Yeah, but that just reminds me of the krautrock, and I think he knows that's what he's drawing on, you know. And it's so great to see or hear that kind of music just continuing and being reborn in somewhere as unlikely as a poverty-stricken country like Mexico, you know. The other great place that there's amazing music coming out from, I don't think we've played any of it here, but is Greece is an amazing place for especially heavy stoner rock. There's a lot of great bands come out of Greece, which again is another sort of financially troubled country, although maybe not in the same kind of category as Mexico. I don't know. I'm not a great foreign traveller, so I don't know any of these things, but it's interesting you should say that track makes you feel like, you know, brings back your experience of Mexico. Amazing.
Definitely. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I thought it was neat, you know, and I've associated. My introduction to krautrock wasn't through krautrock; it was through desert rock, you know. So it was like backwards for me. So like for me, the first band that embodied the krautrock vibe would have been like a band like Caius, you know. Even though I was into Kraftwerk, I don't consider Kraftwerk krautrock still, because it just, to me, it's more like it fits more closer to like Gary Newman than krautrock to me. Only because of the
Europop. It'd be Europop. A lot of their sort of recent output.
I can see that too. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, and I just, for me, just because it's krautrock to me is noodly guitars and, you know, sort of like hypnotic beats, hypnotic rhythms, whereas you know, obviously Kraftwerk does that kind of stuff, but to me, I find them much more melodically exciting and sonically exciting than what I get from when I listen to Faust or Can, you know, but
right.
But I do, you know, but for me, it's like, so is my appreciation of bands like Caius, and like Fu Manchu, and those kind of guys that made me appreciate the krautrock. You know,
were those bands referring back to krautrock in interviews, or how did you know that the krautrock link was there?
I think just by my ears, really. Like, I don't think, like, because like Caius, they were 14 years old when they started doing Caius. Like, I doubt they ever heard krautrock before. I think it was, you know, they were probably just listening to whatever's on the radio at the time, you know, where they were, right. And they like to get stoned, and they like to go into the desert and hang out with a bunch of crazy Mexicans and like get into fistfights and play krautrock, apparently, you know, but they called it stoner rock or desert rock,
right.
You know.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So to me, the krautrock vibe is more Mexican in its origin for me than it is German.
Oh, right,
you know,
right.
Even though I know it's a chicken and egg thing, and we're talking about decades apart in different areas of the world, you know, and I think it's happening again. Like, there's a huge stoner rock, krautrock vibe happening again in like Northern Europe that seems completely disconnected from stoner rock in the US. Like, they seem to be unaware of it almost, you know.
Well, there's like I say, there's a lot of stoner rock coming out of Greece. There's some coming out of Italy. I've worked with a band called Stranger in My Town. Stranger in My Town, which they're
great.
Done some work with, and they're all over. It's a kind of weird vibe, isn't it? It's a kind of weird thing that's happening. And my favorite, I think the stoner rock is my favorite band is King Buffalo. I think they're astonishing.
I got one of their records, I think.
Yeah, they.
Oh wait, no, we had this conversation already. We had this conversation already, and I was like, no, it's not King Buffalo. It's
something else.
Well, we hunt buffalo, and it's a Native American stoner rock,
right?
You know, and they cover King Crimson songs all the time, and they do it like these great sludgy, like stoner rock versions of great King Crimson tunes.
Yeah, there's a whole sort of imagery that goes with stoner rock. You know, obviously you have the stoner aspect of it. You have the depictions of the leaves and the sort of psychedelicness, but there's things like owls and moths and buffalo, and these totemic animals kind of appear a lot in the artwork and in the titles and all that kind of stuff. But King Buffalo, I think, are for me, that their albums are beautifully produced as well, which always helps. And the guy's got such a wonderful melodic way of phrasing what he plays on the guitar, and he's got these really flat vocals, which I love. But nice. Sadly, we won't be able to play any of them because they won't give us permission to play their stuff. We'll maybe work on them. need to go to work on them, persuade them.
Yes, we absolutely should.
Yeah.
King Buffalo, with the massage those guys. And one of my favorite modern stoner rock bands that they keep going, it comes from another weird place. They're from the Ukraine, and they're called Stone Jesus.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and just a great, like, that's, you can't think of a better stoner rock name like Stone Jesus.
Mm.
And the song I heard by them was called The Mountain. And it's funny because it's in English, but they don't, it's like they pronounce it like mountain, on the mountain. But it's good stuff.
Yeah, I love it when foreigners try to enunciate English, and that when it comes out a little bit wrong, and it's quite funny, and other times just endearing. Well, they're trying.
Exactly. Yeah, I can't sing one word of Ukrainian, so I'll give it to them.
No, exactly. I know we shouldn't make fun of people who can speak multiple languages. The next song is going to be one of yours. It's the Cold Pavement.
Ooh, Cold Pavement.
I think that'll be the last one of this show. I think that's quite appropriate.
Sounds like a plan to me. And I think maybe
yes.
if you're up for it, maybe we should start the next show with one of your songs.
That might be a good idea. Yeah, I've got some of mine further down the list. We'll do that next time, though, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we'll do it when we start
good.
The next one. We'll do that. That'll be good, right. So, do you want? I guess you should introduce this, really.
Yeah, I will. Okay, so I'll try not to go too long about this because it's all interwoven into a concept that's like impossible to define. If you and I talked about this a bit on my show there, where we talked about the everything concept and this idea of trying to explain this experience in which you experience all things, time, all ideas, like a whole library of Babel being crammed into your head in this one single moment. And it's often associated with psychedelic experiences, DMT and all these like breakthrough type things, where you have like this infinite amount of things happening in your head all at once, and it's hard to fathom it, and it seems impossible. And then as you come back to reality, even the idea of trying to recollect these thoughts that are so complex, your brain's not capable of sort of going there. And it's my way of trying to describe that's this monumentous universality that seems to be like God and everything all wrapped into one. So everything is a 3-part album, but everything is actually the second part of a trilogy. I haven't finished the third part yet, which is called Nothing. Part 3 is going to eventually be called Nothing. Part 1 was called Forever. But anyway, so the everything thing came about when I was probably the most fruitful I felt I'd ever been. I wrote more music that year than King Gizzard released. It was 2017, I think, is when I wrote this album. Wow. I remember King Gizzard wrote 5 albums that year, and I wrote about 5 albums that year. Their albums are about 40 minutes long. Mine were averaging between an hour and 2 hours long. And I had a day job, and they could probably just sit at home and drink coffee and smoke dope and write these albums, So I had a disadvantage. Now, my quality and my musicianship, I don't think is quite comparable, but I think I'm equally as eclectic though as those guys are. So this song represents a concept in this album there's a lot of this like snake eating its own tail kind of thing happening in this album. And this is one of those songs where it's meant to recall back to another moment to the album, but the 2 songs are completely different from each other. Lyrically, they're almost identical, but musically, they're completely like opposite. And they're both long, sprawling pieces, like most of my songs are. And this song is supposed to be like a moment of desperation, where you feel like you've almost like how that Brad Sucks was kind of trying to like exemplify this idea of, you had intentions, but your intentions went awry. And now you're left with this in this like dark spot where you think you've broken yourself, where you're questioning your life and you're looking around at the shitty relationships you've nurtured, and you wish you'd nurtured the better relationships that you neglected. And you just think about all these things. They put you there, and you think about the lies and the distrust. And when I was writing this album, I had a couple of people who were close to me that I was quickly realizing that I shouldn't trust them. I shouldn't let them in my house, let alone talk to these people. And I was realizing that, I had like there's like chinks in my armor, snakes in the grass. There was all this stuff going on that I felt completely vulnerable and alienated. and this was my like coping mechanism. So I was simultaneously writing a concept while going through some sort of cathartic therapy, which resulted in this song here. And in the song, it's weird because like sonically, I had a hard time with this song. I don't necessarily like the way it sounds. It's kind of lo-fi, but it's also, there's a lot happening in it, and it's moody, and it sounds cold. It sounds like concrete. You know, it's unforgiving. You know, and I even went so as far to record the sound of rain. But like when you think of rain, you think of like water pitter-pattering on leaves and in puddles. But I intentionally put the microphone right next to a concrete slab where there was water overpouring out of a broken downspout on my house. So it's like splashing, and you can hear cars driving by. It's in the city. So it's like the exact opposite of tranquil rain. It's like it's broken rain. It's rain that's going to erode my basement and ruin my house. And there's fucking people fighting at a gas station around the corner, you know, and you can hear them screaming and the horns honking, but you can't really, you know, but I can because I remember the recording, you know, and there's just ugliness to it. And I don't know. And there's just like there's this, as the rain subsides, there's this creeping like serpentine like energy inside of it that it's hard to identify, which is my guitar. But this is when I was very experimental with my guitar, where if there's any sounds happening where you're going, what is that? It's the guitar almost every time. I almost never play synthesizer at this point, other than maybe like my B-bot on my phone. It's all Eyebrow and delay pedals and wah-wah pedals and whammy pedals and whatever else I could do to it. So anyway, I know I've talked a long time, but it's a long song. There's a lot of ideas. So this is Cold Pavement Part 2 off of Everything Volume 3 by Death by Design, which is available on Bandcamp. And I had my website going, but I forgot to pay my GoDaddy fees, so it's defunct right now, but I'm going to rebuild it with a different website builder, and you can maybe buy my music there again as well. So anyway, without further ado,
some days it seems like it will never end. Sometimes it seems like it's all pretend. It just spins around and around. As time stretches my perception, my hands crack and they bleed. Every day, worse as it proceeds. This force brings me to my knees. It's all I can take.
Inside, a feeling very
that 14 minutes?
Yeah.
Wow. Sorry, I've not got you in my ear. Hold on. You're a tiny dislocated voice at the moment. There, you're back in my ear now.
Wonderful.
If the folks at home could see this Heath Robinson setup I've got here, they would wonder anything can get recorded. That was that was amazing. That was 14 minutes. Gosh, I was really away with that one. I was really there with it.
Nice.
The colours and the textures, and there was, gosh, I was getting so many visuals. I can't even describe them. I was on a pirate ship at one point with planks of wood. I don't even know. And I'm not tripping or anything. It's just the sheer effect of the music. I think that track, I don't know whether I would say it's typical of what you do, because there's probably isn't something that's typical of what you do, but that certainly fits into what I've experienced of your music as a certain way of approaching things, which is lots of different bits, lots of progression onto something new, but each part within it, it's almost as though there's a spiral, but each layer of the spiral has something new in it. And obviously there are moments where the music visibly moves from one thing to the next, but there's also moments where it kind of changes slowly and builds into something or builds away from something, and that is quite unusual. I mean, I don't think we've played on the show anything else that comes close to doing that kind of thing.
Okay.
Because the only people I could think that we could refer to, I'm struggling. It would be some of the Krautrockers. It would be someone like Mike Oldfield with his first 3 instrumental albums that had sections that changed, but a completely different form of music. But yeah, there's some Zappa stuffs like that. That's maybe where you get it from, or maybe where the idea came from.
It could be.
But it's exhausting in a way, because it demands so much of the listener. I would say that's not a casual listen.
Oh.
That's not. You don't go into that. You don't go into that the same way you go into Brad Sucks, even though he is a fellow countryman, a fellow Canadian. Obviously, completely different Canadians involved in this process. I don't even know why I'm mentioning that, but yeah, it's kind of a trip, is what it is for me.
It is, yeah, I agree.
And if people at home are listening this far in the show, then they know what we mean by that, which is, well, maybe they don't, maybe we haven't explained that yet, but there's a certain thing that you can do where you shut everything else out and you just go in. And you can't be reading. You can probably be doing something physical. You could be driving or doing the dishes or something like that. But I would argue, to get the most out of the stuff that we play, you have to just devote yourself to that, as we both did just then. I'm looking up and I can see you, your eyes closed, and you're into it, even though it's your track. You're still into it, and I'm in there with it, and I know that I'm in there with you. So, and I hope that people at home are listening in the same way, and we can get this sort of communal thing going. And I think a track like that is perfect for it, because a lot of the music that you come across, even though it's new and it's startling and it's refreshing and all the rest of it, there aren't many 14-minute tracks or one side of an album, let's say somewhere between 15, 20 minutes. There aren't many pieces that will do what we just heard you do there, and that in itself is valuable. But the skill with which you do it and the courage to do it that way, it takes some courage to do that, I think. So you should be congratulated on that.
Thank you.
And I'm right in saying, just for the folks at home, that you play all those instruments?
Oh yeah, everything.
Yeah. So I mean, that in itself says something about what you've just heard. This is not it's not easy music, but then it's so rewarding to me.
Alright, sure for starting it. Never hear it. Sorry, the wire behind the silver.